Koto, no mai, haere mai. Hello and welcome back, everyone. We're going to start with a brief recap of what was covered in session 4. Firstly, learning for picture thinkers, retention of what is being read, symbol mastery technique for nouns, adjectives, and verbs, and the Davis picture punctuation overview. So we'd like to invite you to share what has happened since session 4 with trying out symbol mastery or picture it punctuation for yourself or with your child, grandchild, or your learners, or anything else relating to this mahi that we've been doing. All right, you might remember the text about Gregor or the water beetle, or symbol mastery, creating words with clay word modeling. Roseanne, great.
Grayson and I have just started playing the trigger words. And yes, we're struggling a little bit with the actual picture of the word, but maybe you and Claire could give us some feedback. How many words a day should we do?
2.
2.
No more.
Okay, thank you very much. We did 5 yesterday.
Oh my gosh.
So he'll be happy to hear it's 2.
Yeah. When you're in the middle of a one-on-one program, there's time constraints. You can do more, but as a practice going forward, 2 is probably adequate because it can all get mashed together.
Yeah. I'll be happy. And I'm thinking every day except for Sunday.
Gosh.
Give him a day off.
You're diligent.
We want to get to the end of the year with success. So
yes, totally.
It's not much to take out of your time.
Yeah, 2 a day, 4 days or 5 days or 6 days a week, you'll get through them really well. Obviously, Claire's got to be guiding you. Yeah. But that's my sort of rule of thumb is no more than 2 because the brain's just got to go away and process it.
Okay, that's fabulous. Thank you.
And how is it? What are you noticing as he's doing them?
I'm just finding his whole demeanor is just lighting up. And we were fortunate to be staying with my cousin Jill, who's also dyslexic. And when Grayson came home and Bill asked him, how did it go, Grayson? How did you get on with Jill? Because she can be a bit bossy sometimes. And he said, oh, no, Papa. She understands what it's like for me, and I'm listening.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Couldn't wish for better, really.
So you're having a ripple effect across your family.
Yes, very much. Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. Anyone else would like to share taking on symbol mastery or picture it punctuation or even thinking about reading for picture thinkers this last week? Kathy.
Hello. I typed out the passage on page 35 and got Chester to read through that just to see if he had similar patterns to the 14-year-old boy who you played last week, just out of my own interest, really. I notice he adds a lot of extra words rather than omitting words.
Yes.
There's more words. Is that a common thing?
It's part of the dyslexic creativity.
Okay.
But it can also be compensating for getting other things not quite right.
Yeah.
Yeah. If the pictures are being stimulated in the reading, then they'll be wanting to say all of that.
Yeah, but then with the fictional writing on page 46, I would ask him, what do you feel or what does this mean to you? And he was just say, oh, I feel nothing. I'm nothing. Yeah, he couldn't express anything further with that.
That's the Gregor passage, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It could be. How old is he?
10 this week.
Okay. Yeah. Depending on his actual reading age, the language might not be accessible for him.
He's very good. He's strong at reading. It's the writing and spelling that he's not.
Okay.
He reads to his level anyway.
Okay. Claire's got a great piece of text that we're going to look at today. That might be something that's more in his ballpark.
Thank you.
Yeah, the Gregor text, in some ways, it's quite mature, that whole idea that your body would become an insect. And yeah, it might not be every child's cup of tea. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Someone else, what's opened up out of what you've taken on this week, or any reflections on the work we did last week, creating models of nouns, adjectives, verbs?
Sorry, I do have a little bit more to add. I've been working with Chester with Quizlet for the last couple of weeks, and his spelling in the areas that we've been focusing on has really come along.
Yay!
Yeah, we do the definition and the image, and he's happy to sit down and do half an hour on days that he has time. He seems
Yes.
to enjoy it. He enjoys the block game that's involved in it, but then you still have to spell it during the block game.
Yes, it's quite a good design, that program, to bring that game aspect, or they call it gamification.
He's been keen.
Awesome, that's so great to hear. Anyone else?
So I'm just going to hop in, if that's okay, because Annalise has added something in the chat. They mastered hat, covering for the head,
Yes.
especially one with a shaped crown and brim. She's put that in the WhatsApp chat.
Awesome.
And Matt's little sister added seagull. Yeah, just starting to have fun with the clay and claying
Yes.
things that they like. Nice.
I've always said that if you can make what you're doing engaging and interesting, that's at least 50% of the game won. And then it's like bringing in what really works. But if it's interesting, fun, and young people are gathering around wanting to do it, then, you know, you've won at least 50% of the game. Yeah. The next thing is having the quality of the work come through. A good framework. All right. I'm going to hand you over to Claire, and she's going to create the metaphor for today and go through what we're going to cover. Over to you, Claire.
Thanks, Rachel. The metaphor for today's session is that the road is clearer now because the dyslexic fog is lifting. We're starting to have an awareness of what causes disorientation and confusion, and we're getting a solid set of tools to deal with it on the road ahead. The theme today is going further. And so you'll be doing and experiencing the following. You'll be playing some homophones. We'll talk about what they are in a minute. How to retain dictionary definitions. Then explore picture punctuation a bit more with both fiction and fact. We'll look at some symbol mastery on subject-specific vocabulary as well. We'll start with you playing 2 homonyms just to get an experience of how it feels. And then after it, our main theme today is learning and remembering unknown or new or specialized subject-specific technical vocab. So for many learners, that's the bane of their existence. It's like spelling 101 again, except the words are longer and there are fewer naturally occurring pictures. So the good news is that picture punctuation, dictionary skills and symbol mastery can be applied to any technical vocab word. Then our learners, our children, can retain the meaning and the spelling of such words over time. That's because they're starting to learn the way they learn. Rachel's going to share an example of how that worked for her, and then she'll carry on and take us into the claying session. Thanks, Rachel. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Claire. So this is from my life when I worked in prisons with our vocational tutors and instructors there. There were these horticulture classes, and the learners were really great with the plants and understanding all of that, but they really struggled to remember both the English or the 3 languages of the plant names. So they're known in English, Latin, and then they added in the Te Reo Māori words or kupu for those plants. The more enterprising instructors got their learners to draw or paint pictures of the plants, and then they would name them with English, Latin, and Te Reo Māori words that helped them retain that vocabulary for when they went and did their assessments, their level 2 and level 4 assessments for their qualifications. You'd go into these different training environments and there are these beautiful big paintings all around the walls of these different plants with their different names on them. It was a great way to bring those visual and written worlds together. So we're now going to have a look at homonyms, and you might have come across this word before, but they are some of the trickiest and most triggering words for dyslexic learners in the English language. The homonyms are words that sound alike but mean something different and are spelled slightly differently. A world of confusion right there. They also don't have naturally occurring pictures. Another source of confusion for our wonderful dyslexic learners. If you're interested in the backstory to the word homonym, it's a broad definition and it covers words which are homographs, which are words that are spelled the same but mean something different. For example, the word rose has got same spelling, same pronunciation, but at least two different meanings. Or homophones. They sound the same, but are spelled differently and mean different things. Or both. You've got a lot going on there. Broadly, we're just going to speak to them as homonyms. You might have already thought of some examples of homonyms that your children or learners struggle with. Really common ones are there and there, as in they are, your and your, as in you are, through and through something, and then I threw the ball. We're going to invite you to select and clay a homonym pair now, and we've got about 10 minutes to do that. We're going to walk through a set of homonyms to show some ideas on how to clay them. So Francis is going to share some lovely slides, and we're starting out with by, which means beside or next to. That's the big image here. Then the next one is by, as in expressing good wishes when parting or at the end of a conversation. How often do we say bye every day, like on the phone or saying goodbye to someone? Then there's buy, B-U-Y, obtaining in exchange for payment. So you can see this little person here handing some money over and someone's got some goods. So those are three, and there is a fourth one actually, which we don't have a model for, which is BI, as in like bipedal or bicycle. Sometimes it stands alone as a word and sometimes it's a part of a bigger word. So what we're going to do is choose a homonym pair now, or it could be a trio, like we just showed a trio. Look up the meanings in your dictionary and clay the meaning of each word. We invite you to post photos of your word model in the WhatsApp chat for some show and tell. We just want to add a little bit of nuance or clarification now. The difference between drawing with making pictures with clay ropes and creating 3D models as close to 3D reality as possible is quite important. So imagine if you could create 3D models that can stand up. They can dance, run, or skip. We can, right? And this will make things stronger for the visual spatial learners because it takes it really into that 3D world. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time now to clay your homonym models. And if you have any questions as you're going, just pop your hand up or come off mute and call out.
Do you have any specific techniques you recommend for past tense words?
A timeline.
Okay.
In our one-on-one programs, we work with a lot of the verbs, which are often really tricky trigger words. We'll start with the present tense verb. Last week we did run, and then you would go back and over time, you can't do it all in one hit because the brain gets a bit confused. You can do run and then you could have ran.
Yeah.
And so you create a little timeline, just a strip of clay and arrows at each end to indicate like present, past, present, continuous, and then future.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. How's everybody going? Oh, I see photos being taken. Oh, we find this session, even though it's quite brief in this course, one of the more interesting sessions because I always learn new homonyms that I'd never thought of. I remember when someone did witch and we had this witch on a broomstick flying across the sky. It was brilliant. And I'd never thought of it as a homonym before, but of course it is. So if your models are ready, Rhiannon, bat. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. Now I need to go back to my definition. I think that's a homophone. Sounds the same, but means two different things. Well done. We look forward to seeing a few more of those going into the chat. So whilst you're doing that, I'm just going to wrap up this little section here and then Claire's going to take us into the next section. An additional homework task could be to note down any homonyms that you, your family member or learners have difficulty with and make sure you or they clay these words separately on different days to avoid confusion. In our intensive one-on-one programs, we especially support clients to master words with no obvious pictures, as they are the most triggering words to a dyslexic. Unfortunately, many homonyms are like this. Please carry on making your models. Claire's going to take us through the next section.
Thank you. These words with non-naturally occurring pictures are really useful to Clay. I'm going to cover briefly another example of how visual thinking and pictures and how we can learn creatively aligned to picture thinking skills. Because sometimes, and especially at high school level, a dictionary definition needs to be remembered. It's part of their homework, because then it is used in tests or essays later on. Illustrating the definition can sometimes help, and here is an example. So Francisca has put up a slide produced by one of Richard's sixth form economics students, and afterwards she was able to close her eyes, visualize the pictures she had drawn, and use them as prompts to be able to say the definition without looking at it. So let's look a little bit closer at the creativity here, because she has the whole definition of labour on an index card, a couple of lines between each line of text, and images of human factors of production, workforce, production process. As Francisca clicks through the next slides, it's really just a reminder of another way we can add visual to our learning. Above physical is a strong arm, and mental cognition is the brain. I quite like existing workforce with the time clock and the people with the tools in their hand. There's the production line with something has obviously gone into the box and coming out there. So it's really a reminder of the quote at the bottom of page 49 in your books, because Ron Davis said that the creative process and the learning process, if not the same thing, are so closely associated that we'll never really be able to separate them. We will be sharing another method for revising and retaining information using the record function of PowerPoint. I'll be putting that into the WhatsApp chat. Okay, so back to you, Rachel, for reviewing Picture It Punctuation Fiction.
Wonderful. Thank you, Claire. We're going to review Picture It Punctuation and then extend its use today into other domains. Last session, we dipped into this powerful tool with the Gregor fictional text. Does anybody remember Gregor? Or maybe you remember the insect he became? We're going to look at another text today, which I think you'll find is really great for a range of young people. We're going to demonstrate this text, and it's called The Hills Kids. You can see the title here, and Claire's going to read it out. Just allow yourself to see, feel, taste, and sense the beautiful descriptions. So over to you, Claire.
Thank you. Pippi and Archie lay on the quite wet, vibrantly green long grass, staring up at the blue sky through the trees. Suddenly, whee! The piglet bursts from the forest and is bolting across the clearing, followed by Fergus waving a green fishing net and a floppy bunch of celery.
Thank you, Claire. So we urge you to find something similar to practice with this week with your young people. When a child is 10 and loving the gripping, glorious visual imagery, the piglet bursts from the forest and is bolting across the clearing. This is incredible space. However, this will work with young children who are still in that learning to read phase, while others here are supporting older children or teens who have hit the reading to learn stage in their subject context, such as science and geography. Looking at this next slide, you can see the reading challenge at intermediate and high school level as texts switch from picture-based texts that younger people are familiar with, like this Hills Kids example, to academic-based narratives involving words such as germinate, spores, sprouts, dormancy. Can you remember this happening to you? Or maybe it's happening already to some of your young people. The sudden leap from gentle imagination to dense and complex academic texts for a rangatahi, our teens, is huge. the languaging of subject-specific vocabulary is very difficult for picture thinkers if they don't know the meaning of it and it's not in their mental filing cabinet. So how much harder is this text to understand? Once these technical words are inside their mental filing cabinets, their reading comprehension for technical text is okay. We have a way to show you how to help them. I'm going to hand back to Claire for that.
If you look at page 50, Picture It Punctuation, Fact and Fiction, we're going to introduce the idea of using Picture It punctuation for factual reading. And we want to explore some pitfalls and why these pitfalls actually validate or support the use of Picture It punctuation. They can, in fact, also end up being a great diagnostic. You'll discover how unmastered subject vocabulary can actually block your pictures in a factual text, causing significant disorientation. To explain, when you're younger, words like dog, horse, cat, house, you can easily access that picture. But with subject vocabulary like photosynthesis, calcification, geological, and psychology, you need to learn and understand the meaning first before you can access a picture. We want to walk you through how to do this. If you have younger children, you can actually use what we're about to share to prepare to support them later with this. And if you have teens already, you can start straight away with this. But first, we're inviting you to experience this kind of disorientation with an extreme example, just so you can feel how your children and learners feel. So hold on to your hats because Rachel is going to give us this example from the bottom of page 50.
Yes, thank you, Claire. As she said, hold on to your hats. An entrepreneur is an individual who, rather than working as an employee, founds and runs a small business, assuming all the risks and rewards of the venture. The entrepreneur is commonly seen as an innovator, a source of new ideas, goods, services, and businesses or procedures. Entrepreneurs play a key role in any economy. These are the people who have the skills and initiative necessary to anticipate current and future needs and bring good new ideas to market. Entrepreneurs who prove to be successful in taking on the risks of a startup are rewarded with profits, fame, and continued growth opportunities. Those who fail suffer losses and become less prevalent in the markets. Back to you, Claire.
So how disoriented do we feel right now after listening to so many of those words? Did you experience a lack of comprehension or understanding? And why do you think that is? Perhaps some of the technical or subject-specific words evoked blank pictures because their meanings are unknown or unmastered, or maybe the whole thing triggered you because it was suddenly so difficult. Just remember, if you are feeling triggered, we can do a release. So take a moment to do release, and then I'll hand back to Rachel. So think release, get release, and then I'm dialing back to 5. Rachel.
Thanks, Claire. So I'm going to paraphrase what Richard Whitehead has said to us in this training. Without a certain level of subject knowledge, the picture at punctuation technique will seem to fail. However, this is precisely the point at which the technique becomes a useful, powerful diagnostic tool. If we stop at a punctuation mark and cannot form a mental image, this tells us that one or more of the terms contained in the previous sentence or clause is not fully comprehended or understood. If we cannot picture the meaning for the words entrepreneur, innovator, initiative, or prevalent, we will not succeed in forming a mental picture for the meaning of the first sentence. Back to you, Claire.
True. So rather than return to this highly complex passage, the world of entrepreneurs, Rachel's going to take us through the topic of germination, which is perhaps more relatable for most of us right now, more relatable than the economic text in the manual. So Francisca will share a slide where the person has in their mental filing cabinet something about germination. And actually here we have a high school level text on the germination process. So as you're looking at this one on the slide, we're inviting you to identify and jot down words in this text that occur as blanks, disorientate you, or are unknown or unfamiliar. You'll be researching their meaning shortly in order to get a picture in your mind of what they mean. But right now, just jot a few words down that are not very familiar and they don't create a picture naturally in your mind or easily in your mind. Just give you a minute to do that.
Thank you, Claire. So I'm going to read this passage now, and at the point you stop understanding, that will be the point of disorientation. I invite you to think what word came just before you had that loss of focus. And that will be the word that caused the loss of focus or disorientation. Seed germination is the process by which many plant species develop from a single seed into a plant. This process has an impact on both crop productivity and quality. A common example of seed germination is the sprouting of a seedling from an angiosperm or gymnosperm seed. So Richard also shared with us, at this point, picture punctuation can be used in conjunction with a range of simple research tools. Discussion with a teacher or a fellow student, a paper or electronic dictionary, internet resources, including Google Images and subject-specific word lists, and if known, the Davis techniques such as symbol mastery for words. So these tools all help us to fill in the absent or blank mental images for the meanings of these words. Doing so regularly creates the habit of researching unknown words while reading. And with this approach, picture punctuation becomes not just an aid to reading comprehension, but also a vehicle for repairing missing or mislearned knowledge. So Francisca's going to post a link to some subject-specific vocabulary lists. And these are some of the most common topics and the words that make up their vocabulary lists. That could be a useful resource for yourself and your young people. I'm going to hand you back to Claire, and we're going to actually do some further practice now with these texts.
Thank you. So we want to explore using picture at punctuation for factual reading to gain further knowledge of picture at punctuation's effect on the reading of factual texts in order to enhance our wisdom about the whole thing when coaching your child or learner on picture at punctuation. So Francisca will be setting up breakaway rooms, and there'll be about 3 of you per room, and it'll be for 6 minutes. If there are 2, obviously you can work in pairs, and if you're 3 in the room, 1 can be the observer. And you'll take it in turns, maybe sentence by sentence, or reading up to that first punctuation mark, to lead one another through reading either of the texts on page 50 using picture at punctuation. Now, those 2 texts are the Paris Peace Conference or What is an Entrepreneur? We're just giving you a chance to do this so that you can experience how it feels, and then you'll perhaps come back with questions. Rachel or I might pop in, see how you're going, and at the end it would be good for you to share about your experience and maybe share how you think this might help the person that you're going to be working with. We'll see you back here in 6 minutes.
Welcome back, everybody. That was rapid, wasn't it? And I may not have given you enough time or enough clear instructions, but this is to give you, first of all, a sense of what it's like for our young people. They're suddenly at high school or intermediate, and these are the texts that they're dealing with. Would love to hear from you. What did you get from this last section? How was it working with somebody else? How do you see that this is helpful for working with your young person? Who'd like to share?
I will.
Thanks, Rhiannon.
I worked with Urapikia and we did a bit of an experiment where we broke the sentence down into its parts using the punctuation initially, and then tried running it all together to see if the picture was easier when you had it as a whole, and it definitely wasn't. Even though the pictures were quite hard, I would say, to come by with it broken down, there was just confusion almost immediately when you tried to run it together as a sentence. And I was just saying to Urapikia, I'm not a picture thinker. So my challenge is to think in pictures, which I guess gives me a sense of the disorientation that my son is feeling when he's trying to do it the other way around. So yeah, it was an interesting exercise.
Yeah. Yeah. From both perspectives, right? From a word
Yeah.
thinking perspective and a picture thinking perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that chunking it into smaller pieces. And sometimes you get a big long sentence that's got no punctuation. And sometimes you literally have to chunk it yourself into shorter pieces so that your brain can then process it in a visual way. This seems really laborious at this point in the journey, but as you develop this as a skill, and also then when you're working with teaching your young person, your brain will start to process it a lot faster, but it gets overwhelmed at a certain point and it can't take in more information. That's the design of punctuation also. When you get into what I call the geeky aspects of punctuation, it is designed for our brain to pause, take in that information, and then take in the next chunk and the next chunk and the next chunk. So there is a science to it all, or a design to it all, but it's for us as readers to learn to use those markers, if you like, to help build our comprehension. Thank you, Rhiannon, and thank you for doing the experiment as well. I thought that was really cool. Matt, I saw your hand up before. Go ahead.
Yeah, with myself and Roseanne, I largely did the talking, and what I said was that basically it was hard for me to put myself in Luke's shoes from a little bit of a different angle than Rhiannon. I can do think in pictures, but it's more, my vocabulary is so much stronger than Luke's. And like, for instance, when we did the germination thing, I said that I got hung up on the final two words, basically, or angiosperm and gymnosperm, and the rest was fine. Luke's not in the same boat. And then they were very helpful in what I then progressed to, and then saying I found difficulty with how to clay some of the stuff that you could put into pictures and to explain them to them. They gave me some real good help there, just taking me back. I came up with can and can, like can as in a can of food, and then can. And Claire pointed out to me that, well, I pointed out that the can of food is easy to put in a picture. The can had difficulty, also said, contrast it. And
Yes.
a flow mat to something that the child can do and something they can't. So, yeah, sorry, there was a little bit of a rush of stuff there to say, but yeah, that's my bit. And thanks, Roseanne and Claire, for the assist. Appreciate it.
Awesome. That's brilliant, Matt. And this is the reality, right? We, as the slightly older people in the room, have a lot more vocab on board naturally, right? And then it's taking it back. So your experience that you had with gymnosperm and angiosperm, that's like an adult version of what your son Luke is dealing with, lots of smaller everyday words. Yeah. So whilst uncomfortable, now you're starting to see the world he's in, and it's taking the words that he's dealing with in his daily life and making them understandable for him. And those models make a big difference. It's awesome. We're going to take our 5-minute break now. So this is really a stretch, grab a coffee, whatever, break for 5 minutes. Thanks, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. So we're just going to be working again now with the Davis symbol mastery procedure. So I'm just going to point out you've got 2 resources to work with, and our focus really is picturing technical definitions today. So there's a chart on page 51 of your workbook to note down any subject vocabulary and other less common words that either you or your child, grandchild, or learners struggle with. Typically, these words will arise out of your own or your young person's textbook reading. Your child will come up with a blank picture when using picture punctuation to read a sentence containing one or more of those words. That's on page 51. Then page 52 is a chart of the Davis symbol mastery procedure again for your reference. So now we're going to get into some deepening of the symbol mastery process, and there's a whole 2 pages of hints that we're going to work our way through. We're going to start by skipping a page in your workbook and going to page 54. And you'll be already familiar with a lot of these hints. I'm going to read through the first 3 hints, and then we'll be doing a group exercise to work through the rest of them. So the first hint is to use a dictionary or glossary that gives example sentences or phrases along with each definition. The second one is some words have multiple definitions, as we've just seen today with the homonyms. Quickly identifying the definition pertaining to the subject material in question is a skill that requires practice. For example, the word element will typically have several definitions, only one of which will pertain to its meaning in chemistry. This definition will often be flagged by the inclusion of the word chemistry or chemical in brackets just before the definition. Learning to scan the list of definitions to find key pointers of this kind will help you locate the required definition quickly. And then number 3, if you hit a definition that you cannot make sense of, there is probably a word in the definition you do not understand or have a meaning for. For example, those words angiosperm and gymnoph may have been like that for you. You can look up the confusing word or look in another dictionary to see if it explains the definition more clearly. An electronic dictionary will often allow you to click through to the definitions of words within the definition and will have a back button that can then be used to return to the original word entry. So now we're going to invite you to read the remaining hints out, alternating with one another. And you'll be in a breakout room, and there'll be 3 of you in the room. You'll have 3 hints to review. If you wind up in room number 1, you read hints 4 to 6. Room number 2, you will read hints 7 to 9. And then room number 3, you'll read hints 10 to 12. So once you've read them, we want you to answer the following questions. The first question is to be able to name the hint, briefly describe the hint, and how this will help yourself, your child, or learner. So you'll do that when you come back into the main plenary session, the main room. Francisca is going to put you in breakout rooms for 5 minutes, and then we'll look forward to what you have to say when you come back. Welcome back, everybody. What was the most interesting or most useful hint that you discovered in this little section? Anyone like to say?
We had a couple that were quite useful for some of those more abstract ideas. We had thought bubbles to show what's going on in the mind, and then speech bubbles, and that's obviously talking about things. But the one I probably found most useful was to make sure you're using lowercase letters. And I've noticed that I have a tendency to always start my words with a capital letter because they might be going to be the beginning of a sentence.
They're all really great points, Rhiannon. I've had people who only use uppercase letters when they're writing, adult students. They've never really mastered their lowercase letters in any way. So yes, encouraging your young people to use the letters that are appropriate to the word. Most of our words are lowercase, and it's only if it's a proper noun or if it's at the beginning of a sentence would it have an uppercase. So some of people's names, place names, they have uppercase beginning letters. Yeah, that's the good form. Brilliant. And then Helen, I saw your hand up.
So I found it quite good to use the arrows to show the direction and also present tense and past tense.
Yes, arrows are our favourite symbol because it just makes it really clear. What are you pointing to? I just want to pick up on what you said, Rhiannon, too, about the speech bubbles and the thought bubbles. They are super powerful. You can enclose a lot in a thought bubble or a speech bubble. You can also do a heart bubble too. So if it's a feeling, if it's about a feeling, like I could say, I feeling love for my dog. So I can have a heart bubble coming out and then have my dog and that sort of thing there, and just have the bubble connected to my heart. So they're very powerful structures to help us with symbol mastery. I am going to read through now the mastery tips at the bottom. They are details, but they make all the difference. The first one is to make sure that your child only has the model and word in view when they're mastering their words, right? So I say to everybody, clear the decks of other bits of pieces of clay, pens, clay cutters, cups of tea, and everything else that ends up on the table, and just have a clear space around what they've mastered. Or you might want to put it onto a plain coloured tray, not a highly patterned one, but just a plain coloured tray or even a piece of paper, so that they're clearly just looking at that model when they're going through their mastery steps. Makes all the difference to what they incorporate into their picture. Encourage your child to identify and point to each part of the definition represented by his model as the meaning is said. So Claire did this beautifully last week with the elements of puppy, right? The floppy ears, the big paws. She was speaking to each of the elements in the definition. Then encourage your child to reflect on the accuracy of the modeled definition by saying what part of your model shows you and whatever that is. So when you start to get into definitions where there's more than one thing being represented, then you ask them to point out all parts of those definitions. So, for example, the word by means beside or very near. So you want both of those ideas represented in the model. You can ask a young person, so show me the beside aspect. Great. And then show me the very near, right? So that's really clear in their heads. I think there's another big hint at the bottom, have fun. Make this a fun activity. As you're discovering, Roseanne, when they get into making these models, they love to do it. And that's great. And that's where ultimately the learning comes from. All right. So now we're going to go back to page 53. So today's session is a little bit like that, a bit zigzaggy. So we're going to go back to page 53 and we're going to explore the use of symbol mastery for subject-specific vocabulary. I'm going to hand over to Claire now for this section.
Thank you very much. We just want to give you further knowledge of the symbol mastery procedures effect on your learners' mastery of subject vocabulary. We just want to give you as much practice as possible to enhance the process when coaching your own child or learner in the process. Francisca's going to show germinate model. The definition of germinate is to begin to grow and put out shoots after a period of dormancy. When I first played this, I just put a seed and a sprout. But then when I looked at that full definition, it's actually quite complex. To begin to grow and put out shoots after a period of dormancy. Ensuring that all aspects of a definition are represented in the model is something that you'll definitely need to be mindful of when you're doing this with your child or learner. Otherwise, it will be just a superficial meaning. And as Rachel has just been talking about, the key question to ask as they're going and at the end is, do you have all parts of the definition in your model? Show me. We are now going to play a subject-specific word together, and that is estuary. And I'll hand back to Rachel to take us through that one.
Thank you, Claire. Francis is going to share a slide showing the definition of estuary, and we've put the English word and definition in. When you go to create the word, please feel free to use the word from the language of your choice. If you have another language you prefer to use, please use that. And we'll work through the first 4 symbol mastery steps together. Then we'll have you make your clay models in Word and go through the remaining steps to master them. We'll be using the symbol mastery procedure from page 52 and the symbol mastery hints that you've just reviewed on pages 54 to 55 to guide you. So we're now going to go through steps 1 to 4, and this is particularly to get clear on all elements of the definition. So Claire and I are going to go through that together, and you want to follow along as you're going. We'll let you go ahead and play the model and then master it. Perhaps if we could have the slide back up, please, Francisca, so we can just walk our way through this. So the first step is to look up the word. So we've already done that. And then to pronounce the word. So Claire, do you want to go ahead and pronounce the word estuary?
Yes, estuary.
Thank you. And then read one definition and its example sentence out loud.
It's a noun, so the meaning is the tidal mouth of a large river where the tide meets the stream. It's an outlet and an entrance of a river or harbour, etc. And I think I'd like to talk about making it clear. When I was growing up, we used to do white baiting at the estuary of the Waimakariri River. We would wait for the high tide to start coming in, as in the tide change, in order to catch our white bait. So now I might have just gone ahead to the next one, but I've got a definition and now I'm trying to make it clear in my mind from a context that's meaningful to me.
Yes,
Yeah.
very good. So that is
Yeah.
step 4, establish a clear understanding of the definition. And we've been talking about it, or you've offered that memory. Can you think of a sentence to use the word estuary?
Yes. The estuary is a great place to go white baiting because that's where the low tide and the high tide start switching.
Okay, brilliant. So can you now take the word estuary out and then say that first piece that you said, the estuary is a great place to go white baiting. Can you replace the word estuary with the definition we have here?
Sure. So the tidal mouth of a large river where the tide meets the stream, outlet, entrance of a river or harbour, etc., is a great place to go white baiting.
Brilliant. And do you now have a picture in your head of the definition of estuary?
Absolutely.
Brilliant. That's the point, and this is for everybody, that's the point. You would go ahead and play the model of the definition, or you would have your young person do that. When they go, I can see, and you might want to check it and say, what do you see? Claire, what I can see, but what can you see of that?
Yeah, I can really see it. I can see the river coming down and then going wider, and I can see waves. So where the river's coming down, the current is one way, then the waves are coming in and mixing as they do. So I
Yes.
think I know exactly what I want to clay. I want to clay not only the shape of the river and the estuary, but the current and the waves as well. And that will give the real true definition of estuary.
Brilliant. So everybody, you might have already started. I see a bit of clay happening. But you want to go ahead now and make your model of estuary. So that's step number 5. And then once you've done that, go ahead and do step number 6, which is to make the model of the word estuary using lowercase letters. If you're still stuck about coming up with a picture, just put your hand up and we'll have a chat about it as everyone else is claying. All right, so you may still be making your model. I see some of you are starting to post your models in the WhatsApp chat, which is really awesome. I'm going to invite anybody who would like to share your model with the group. I can ask you some questions about the aspects of the definition that are in there. Would anyone be willing to talk through their model that they've put up in the WhatsApp chat? Was that a hand up, Kathy?
Yeah, I can if you like.
Brilliant.
So I have a river flow with an arrow showing the current one direction, small river off the side to show that it's a big river. And then I have the shape like a mouth or lips in between. And then I have waves going the other direction with another arrow pointing that way.
Brilliant. That's an excellent use of arrows to make really clear the definitions. And I love that idea of a mouth, like you've actually got. Very good. That is from a landscape perspective, like the river's there with its mouth wide open as the sea comes towards it. Yeah. Beautiful. Someone else want to have a go just sharing their model and checking for the elements of the definition being there?
I'm happy to if no one else wants to.
Go ahead, Matt.
Sure, I'll try and follow his way of doing it like that.
Brilliant.
Hopefully it doesn't all fall off. Yeah, up the top there, you can see there's two lines down the side are meant to be essentially the river mouth and
Yes.
shoreline. It starts with a narrow neck and then gets a bit wider, and then it opens all the way out. The three little squiggles in the river are meant to reflect a smaller sort of volume of water moving, with the waves meant to be showing a much bigger one, and like perhaps even the heart of the ocean. And the intermediate sort of size squiggles with the arrow pointing at them in that sort of space is the estuary. I didn't have time to put the word together like Kathy did, so cap off to you for getting all of it done. But yeah.
You did the core stuff, which is your model represents those aspects of the definition. Yeah. And it seems like it's really clear to you. So then there's just now making the word with the clay ropes. Yeah. Good. Great. Awesome. All right. What I'm going to do is ask us all to do the next steps, which is steps 7 through 9. So I'll just read those out and then I'll get you, make sure you're all on mute, because we've discovered doing it with not on mute doesn't really work for people. The first thing, step 7, is to say aloud to the model of the concept, you are estuary, meaning, and then the definition. Yep. And then the second is to say aloud to the word or to the word that you're making, you say estuary, and then the definition. Make a mental picture of the word and the clay model all together, because it's a complete thought. All right, I'll give you a few minutes to do that before we get some feedback on this whole process. If you want to put your models up in the WhatsApp chat, we'd love to see them, but entirely up to you. Yeah. One thing I forgot to say before is when you're mastering the model, point to all the elements of the definition in your model, and that helps the brain retain that more clearly as well. Yeah. One more thing I forgot to say is make sure that you use your dial and release tool before you master the words, just to make sure you're really focused. Loving seeing all of your models of estuary. Notice some of them quite a bit of detail coming in, and we love the creativity. When you're working with your young person, you just want to try and say to them, can we just have the elements of the definition represented, not all the additional detail that our creative brain tends to want to add in. Roseanne?
Rachel, what is the benefit of spelling the word backwards?
I'll get Claire to answer that one.
Yes, the dyslexic mind has the ability to flip and rotate. Also, what we would love them to do once we've identified how they see the word, because if they take a mental picture of the model and the word and close their eyes, then they can read off their visualization and they can read backwards and always finish forwards. It just shows them that they can use their visualization to learn. And the parents who aren't the visual spatial people go, wow. And it's a really good encouragement for people.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There are additional exercises at the bottom, A through D. So you might want to read those during the week and incorporate that into your mastery process as well. Often we find particularly that touching and saying the letters is just that more physical connection with the word, and Claire beautifully explained the backwards and forwards reading of the visualization. Writing the word, often you'll start to see that their writing improves, the neatness of their writing improves once they're copying off a word that they've mastered. Then you can always experiment with the word during the week and make sentences with it and make sure that they really understand the usage of it. Before we wrap up the session, would love to hear from you. How do you see that you can work with this tool with your young people? Where would it be useful for them, or perhaps yourself if you're trying to learn particular terminology in your mahi, your work, your career? This is kind of like an open discussion for a few minutes. Where would this be useful? Kathy?
Hey, I can see how it can be useful at high school, especially when they start doing the more technical terms. For now, though, how do we help them? My son enjoys reading at nighttime by himself, and it's a pleasurable thing for him to do. In terms of, I'm sure he sees words that he doesn't understand and skips by. How do I get him into a space where words he doesn't understand we work with together? Is it better to let him enjoy his reading and do separate exercises with him?
Yes. So I would say to him, are there words that you're reading that you're not really sure about? And you could say, can you share them with me? And maybe we start a little list, and then we have the practice of mastering those in clay. So the process of looking them up in the dictionary, talking about it, and then making a clay model will help him learn that word for the rest of his life. So that will improve his reading quite rapidly. But so it's inviting him to let you know those words.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've had that conversation with him before, but there are words, but he's just mowing through his book that get him to actually mark maybe at night and in the
Yeah, like he might want to mark them or put a bookmark in that page so he can go back and show you, or write it down on a little notebook or something. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I
And you
can,
could make
yeah.
the words the villain. You could say that there's some tricky words in our language. So it's not that he's got the problem,
Yeah.
that there are tricky, and this is a fact, there are really many tricky words in our language. So to help him have some more certainty, because that's the other thing, is when we trip up over words frequently, it erodes our certainty of what we're reading, and it can chip away at our confidence. If he's missing words that are either unknown or unmastered in some way, he will be missing out on a chunk of understanding. So keep it, but make the word the villain.
I assume the more we clay definitions, the more it is retained in the mind.
Yeah,
We did
100%. Yeah.
perceive with Claire last year when I had a session with her, and there's no way my son would now be able to spell that word, but I assume the more they do it, the more these things are retained.
You'd be surprised. I think once something is clayed, the amount of longevity of retention is huge.
Even if they don't see it in everyday writing.
Yeah, it'd be worth testing. What was that word and can you remember it? I'm always surprised at what people retain once they've made it in the 3D. Matt.
So for me, I'm pretty verbose, you may have all gathered. So Luke frequently switches off when I'm trying to explain stuff to him. Too many words will do that. So I think going to the clay, and particularly for something that may involve a bit more of an explanation, could be quite helpful for me as well as him for keeping things on track. I do this exercise, get a clear idea of what I want to put in the picture and basically stick to it. And as long as I'm disciplined about that, hopefully I'll avoid a lot of the waffle that can sometimes hopefully be fun for him as well.
Yeah, totally. And it can be fun, everyone's sitting around the table together, making their models of the same word, because then you can talk about it a little bit more and show what you're seeing and they'll show what they're seeing.
More of a dialogue in that sense rather than me monologuing. So, yeah.
100%. Yeah. Dialogue is where the learning happens for both parties, right? What we're doing here, this is all a dialogue, right?
Yeah.
If I just gave you 2 hours as a monologue, none of you would come back the next session, guaranteed. So it's about creating that dialogue back and forth. It's really powerful. Great. So these are things to try at home. Continue using the release and dial procedure with yourself and your child if they're willing. Always remember, we want them willing, not feeling obliged, because then they're more likely to get benefit from it. Try out picture it punctuation on some factual texts with your family members, again, if they're willing. If you find that they disorientate heavily during the reading process and they haven't had a Davis program to resolve that disorientation, the procedure may work better if you read out loud to your child and then stop at each of the stop signs, so the punctuation marks, and ask them to make their mental images from what they just heard. Have a go at symbol mastery on one or more subject-specific words with yourself and or your family member if they're willing. If you and your family member really wish, you can upload photos to the WhatsApp group to share. And then really invite you to revisit any activities from the course that you have found challenging over the last 5 weeks and bring them with you to our next session, which is our final session next week. You can use the space at the bottom of page 56 in your workbook to make any observations you want to bring along. Before we go over the topics for next session, I just really want to encourage you to use this week. Next session will be our last session together. So use this week to really try stuff out. Maybe that you've been like, oh, I'm not sure if that's going to work. Give it a go, because we're here, we're available to give feedback. Have a go, try something out. It worked, it didn't work. Come back and ask us for feedback in the WhatsApp chat. That's the purpose of that group. It's not just to show our models, which is fabulous, or for us to remind you about stuff. It is also a community. So if you have questions, or if you tried something and it didn't quite go the way you expected, pop the question in there, and Claire and I keep an eye on that chat during the week, and we'll respond and add in anything we think needs a longer explanation to session 6, because session 6 is really revision, wrap up, planning going forward, but it's an opportunity to get your questions answered. So really use this week as best you can to try stuff out that maybe you hadn't had the space to do before. So we're now going to have a look at the final slide for today, and it's just got an overview of what we'll be covering at session 6. So we'll be talking about facilitation versus teaching, advanced applications of picture at punctuation, dictionaries, their power for picture thinkers, and we're going to do simple mastery on another subject-specific word, parasite. So just letting you know. And then we'll be conducting a comprehensive course review and creating a complete support strategy for your child or learners going forward. Another big session, not so much new information, but deepening our knowledge of what we've done already. It is exactly top of the hour. How do we do that?